Imagine a continent rich in resources, diverse cultures, and vast potential. Africa, with its breathtaking landscapes, abundant wildlife, and vibrant communities, stood as a testament to the beauty and diversity of our world. Now imagine this continent carved up by outside forces, its people subjected to foreign rule, its destiny controlled by others. The arrival of European powers marked the beginning of a tumultuous era where the autonomy of African nations was stripped away. This sadly is the story of Africa during the era of European colonization. The resilience and resistance of African people were met with brutal force as colonizers imposed their will and exploited the land and its inhabitants. From the late 19th century to the mid-20th century, European powers, driven by greed and a sense of superiority, engaged in a mad scramble for African territories. They sought to expand their empires, driven by the allure of Africa's untapped resources and strategic locations. This period, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw European nations dividing the continent among themselves, drawing borders with little regard for existing ethnic groups or traditional boundaries. The arbitrary lines drawn on maps disregarded the rich tapestry of African cultures and communities. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, a meeting of European powers without a single African leader present, formalized this division. Decisions made in distant conference rooms would forever alter the fate of millions of Africans. The arbitrary borders drawn during this conference continue to have a profound impact on Africa today. These borders often split ethnic groups and communities, leading to conflicts and tensions that persist to this day. This scramble for Africa marked the beginning of a dark chapter in the continent's history, a period of exploitation, oppression, and the systematic dismantling of African societies. The legacy of colonization is still felt as Africa continues to navigate the challenges imposed by its colonial past. European powers saw Africa as a source of raw materials to fuel their own industrial revolutions. They exploited Africa's vast mineral wealth, its fertile lands, and its people. Countries like Belgium, France, and Britain extracted enormous profits from African colonies. Resources like gold, diamonds, rubber, and timber were shipped off to Europe, enriching colonial powers while leaving African economies depleted. This systematic plunder stripped Africa of its wealth and left a legacy of economic dependence that continues to plague many African nations today. The colonial project relied on a brutal system of forced labor. Africans were coerced into working on plantations, in mines, and on infrastructure projects, often under inhumane conditions. This exploitation robbed Africans of their dignity, their health, and their lives. Millions of Africans were forced into servitude, treated as little more than cogs in the machinery of colonial greed. The human cost of this exploitation was immeasurable, leaving deep scars on African societies. European colonization went beyond economic exploitation. It was a full-on assault on African cultures, languages, and traditions. Colonial powers sought to impose their own values, languages, and systems of governance, often suppressing or dismissing African ways of life as primitive or uncivilized. Traditional African religions and belief systems were often denigrated, while Christianity was promoted as the superior religion. This cultural imperialism sought to erase African identities and replace them with a European mold. Section 5. Dividing lines on the map, dividing people on the land. The arbitrary borders drawn by European powers during the scramble for Africa had a devastating impact on the continent. These borders often cut across existing ethnic groups and kingdoms, dividing people who had long lived together and igniting tensions that persist to this day. By forcing different ethnic groups together within artificial boundaries, colonial powers created conditions ripe for conflict and instability. This legacy of division continues to haunt many African nations, hindering their ability to build cohesive and prosperous societies. Section 6. Seeds of Discord. The legacy of colonial borders. The arbitrary borders drawn by colonial powers continue to have a profound impact on Africa today. They have led to ethnic conflicts, political instability, and hindered economic development. Many African countries are still grappling with the challenges posed by these colonial legacies. The legacy of these borders is a bitter reminder of the disregard for African self-determination that characterized the colonial era. It is a legacy that continues to shape the political and social landscape of many African nations. Section 7. Fighting back African resistance to colonial rule. Despite the overwhelming power of the European colonizers, Africans never passively accepted their subjugation. They fought back with unwavering determination and resilience. From the very beginning, Africans resisted colonial rule in various forms. From armed uprisings that shook the foundations of colonial powers to acts of civil disobedience that demonstrated their unyielding spirit. These acts were not just spontaneous reactions, but were often well-organized and strategically planned. These acts of resistance were a testament to the enduring spirit of the African people. They showcased the unity and solidarity among different communities, transcending ethnic and regional divides. Across the continent, communities rose up against their oppressors, fighting for their land, their freedom, and their dignity. They were driven by a deep sense of justice and a desire to reclaim their sovereignty. These acts of resistance, though often met with brutal repression, were crucial in maintaining the spirit of defiance. The colonizers' attempts to crush these movements only strengthened the resolve of the African people, helped to keep the flame of freedom alive. Leaders emerged from these movements, inspiring future generations to continue the struggle and pave the way for eventual independence. These sacrifices made by these brave individuals laid the foundation for the liberation of their nations, leading to the birth of independent African states. Section 8. Heroes of Liberation, Leaders of African Independence Movements. The fight for African independence gave rise to extraordinary leaders who inspired their people and challenged the foundations of colonial rule. Figures like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, and Nelson Mandela of South Africa became icons of the liberation struggle. These leaders, through their courage, vision, and unwavering commitment to freedom, helped to usher in a new era for Africa. Their legacies continue to inspire generations of Africans and people around the world fighting for justice and equality. Section 9. The chains are broken, but the scars remain. The challenges of post-colonial development. After decades of struggle, African nations finally broke free from the shackles of colonial rule. But the road to recovery from the ravages of colonialism has been long and arduous. Many African countries gained independence only to find themselves grappling with the challenges of poverty, underdevelopment, and political instability, legacies of their colonial past. The task of building new nations from the ashes of colonialism was immense. Decades of exploitation had left African economies in ruins, education systems in disarray, and political institutions weak. Section 10. A New Dawn, African Nations Forging Their Own Path. Despite these challenges, African nations have made significant strides since independence. They have made progress in areas like education, healthcare, and economic development. Across the continent, a new generation of leaders and activists are working to address the challenges of the present and build a brighter future. African nations are asserting their rightful place on the global stage, demanding a more just and equitable world order. They are embracing innovation, entrepreneurship, and technological advancement to drive progress and prosperity. Section 11. The Unfinished Struggle Confronting the Legacy of Colonialism in the 21st Century. While colonialism may be a thing of the past, its legacy continues to cast a long shadow over Africa. The remnants of colonial rule are still visible in the political boundaries, economic structures, and social hierarchies that persist today. The struggle to overcome the social, economic, and political consequences of colonialism remains an ongoing battle. This battle is fought on multiple fronts, from grassroots movements to governmental reforms, and requires a collective effort from all sectors of society. Confronting this legacy requires acknowledging the injustices of the past, addressing present-day inequalities, and understanding the deep-rooted impacts that colonialism has had on African societies. It also involves working to build a future where all Africans have the opportunity to thrive. This means investing in education, healthcare, and infrastructure to create a more equitable society. It is a struggle for true equality, for a world where the contributions of all people are valued and respected. This vision of equality is not just a distant dream, but a tangible goal that requires persistent effort and dedication. For a world where the contributions of all people are valued and respected, we must celebrate the rich cultural heritage and innovative spirit of African communities. It is a struggle that demands justice, not just for the past, but for the present and the future of Africa. This justice is essential for healing and for paving the way towards a brighter, more inclusive future for all.